Welcome to the To Be Honest podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Alex Spielmann, who is an 18-year-old queer and trans Asian American from the Bay Area. Alex uses spoken word to express their frustration with the systems of oppression that affect them and many other people. They are studying sociology at Anza College and are hoping to become a teacher in order to make a difference in the lives of other young people who have experienced similar trauma to themselves. Alex has struggled with their mental health for the majority of their lifetime and knows firsthand the difficulties that come with seeking help and support. So, welcome, Alex, to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. And before we start, I like to ask every guest, to be honest, how are you doing today?
To be honest, I'm okay. I'm not great. I think it would be weird if I was great right now, considering all the bizarre shenanigans happening out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There's a truck that's decided to beep right outside my window right now. So, but I'm okay. Today is a good day.
Yeah, that's good. I'm glad today is good. And I totally understand how you're feeling with, the world circumstances right now. But yeah. So would you mind sharing a bit about your experience with mental health?
Yeah. So when I look back at my own life, it's I can't really find a point where I didn't kind of have this baseline of depression and anxiety. And because I didn't really have any other starting point, I didn't know that it wasn't normal. Um the things that I was feeling. And also my parents both also struggle with mental health challenges. So the kind of, I guess, the model that I had growing up was not, maybe not one that typically people have. I struggled a lot with feelings of low self-worth, and um I I don't really feel like calling it bullying is the best descriptor, but I really struggled with the social parts of school. I didn't feel like anyone understood me in the way that I was meant to be understood. Um, I felt really isolated, uh, and because ever since I've been old enough basically to talk and choose how I want to present my gender, it hasn't matched up with the conception of, you know, what my body is supposed to look like according to the doctor and the letter that's stamped on my birth certificate and the name and the pronouns that teachers would use for me. And because of that difference, a lot of people were confused and didn't really know how to treat me. A lot of people felt like they had the right to ask me extremely invasive and personal questions. And this was before I had the language. I knew that transgender people existed out there in the world, but I didn't have the, especially the terms I use now are transmasculine and non-binary, because I don't feel like my gender is explicitly male. And the kind of conception that I had back as a young person was I I can't be transgender because I don't feel like the most macho, muscly, drinking beer and sports or whatever it is that is the stereotypical thing that men do. So I'm not transgender, and I kind of, when I got to middle school, I found the label of butch lesbian, and that was kind of the first time that I like found it was like discovering this piece of the puzzle almost. um and so I finally like was able to place myself in the context of like other people in a way that actually felt more aligned to who I actually was, and not like I was just playing this role like of an actor that I hadn't like consented to. um and that was the around the time that I placed or I began to like seek out other people in the community who had like similar identities as I did. um and I came out, and it was mostly the reception was positive. I did but for a few people at school it did make my life more difficult. And uh I ended up, because of the constant like harassment that I was receiving, um it was just like every day it would be like I would be called slurs. I a couple times have like school supplies thrown at me, and so it was this like constant, like that just added to my already my sense of alienation at school, just like made me feel like school is never going to be a place where I will ever feel safe. Um, I didn't feel like that my peers respected me or understood me. When I reached out to adults, I remember I told a guidance counselor about what was happening, and she basically in a more polite way told me to just ignore it and that it wasn't her problem. And I remember like walking out of that office just with this knowledge in my gut that like adults are not going to help me. I have to deal with this situation myself if I ever want it to be resolved. And that's not a healthy thing for a child to feel that they have to do. Um, and now I'm trying to look back at myself with more compassion. But in that place that I was, I ended up doing something that I regret, and I ended up getting into a physical altercation with one of the people who was consistently making homophobic and transphobic remarks to me. Um, and like, it's not something I'm proud of. I it doesn't even feel great to like admit it on a podcast, but I think it's important that I do share that part of my story, because after that happened, it kind of changed the way that I was seen in the from the perspective of the school system. Um, because of one action, one like mistake that had harmed somebody, but one action that I had made because I didn't have the tools to have any other way or any other solution. I was like operating based on this like on the only thing that I felt that could give me any sort of sense of control. But because of that one instance, it kind of felt like staff and teachers and stuff just kind of gave up on me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they stopped reaching out to me. They stopped supporting me academically. And it kind of felt like the expectation that I was going to be successful had just been removed and was no longer there. And suddenly I began to experience things in the school system that like that gave me a glimpse into like for other folks, that's the only experience they have, is going to school feeling like they don't belong, feeling like teachers don't respect them, that they're
Mhm.
only seen as people who are up to no good and troublemakers. And it's just terrible. And like, again, it's not, how can we treat how can we as a society treat our children like that and then expect them to grow up and be able to like emotionally self-regulate and be stable when they haven't been shown the tools to do that.
Mhm.
um and at that point, I was deeply suicidal. I felt like I had no control. I School wasn't a safe place for me. um and at home it was just difficult because my parents were doing the best they could, but they were dealing with their own mental illnesses and also just the really really strong generational trauma on both sides of my family tree. um and so I've kind of carried this like suicidal ideation piece for many years now. um but one of the things or the two things that saved my life during that period, that was probably the darkest period of my life, was finding a community of other queer people, um, both young people my age and then also adults,
Mhm.
who had been through the things that I had experienced and had come out the other side and had lived to tell the tale and to share that the wisdom and just the knowledge that it does get better, as cheesy and like annoying as that sounds. um and then also, um when I got to high school, I made a connection with the first teacher who, since like the incident, had ever seen me not for what a piece of paper in my record was, but for me as a person, as a
Mhm.
person who was capable of doing great things, a person who had worth and value. And that was just so I'm getting like actual goosebumps right now, but that was so powerful and
Mhm.
life changing and something that should not be the exception. It should be the norm.
Right. Yeah, I think it's yeah, you touched on something really important there with where schools should be a support system, one, and two, teachers. I think a lot of teachers, not to put teachers down because teachers are great, but I think some teachers see students as, their students. They're supposed to come to school, sit down, learn, receive the information, repeat it back to them, and then like move on to their next class. Whereas these are young people that have so many facets to their life. They have home lives, they have social lives, they have their questions within themselves, like they're going through a lot. And I think it's important for teachers to recognize that. And I'm glad that there was that one teacher for you to do that and to see you for who you are. So I think that's really important.
Yeah. And like right now, as I'm, you know, in college and kind of thinking about what kind of career I want, I feel really drawn to the profession of teaching just because of the things that I didn't get for so long, and the things that that teacher was able to give me, and how I feel compelled to, if I can do that for just one young person who is in that, like, that horrible place, like, I feel like it's almost like a easing of my own burden.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's amazing that you want to give back to students in the way that, some people can be there for you, but it sounds like, yeah, you have an unique perspective that I think would really help a lot of people. So yeah, that's really exciting that you're going into teaching though. So Do you want to teach like middle school, high school, elementary school? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking high school, maybe middle school. I'm not sure.
Hmm. Cool. That's awesome. Um, so when you first started experiencing symptoms of a mental illness, I know you kind of mentioned that you don't really remember a time when you weren't experiencing something, but when you first, was there a time when you first noticed it or when you first felt like you could share that with someone?
Yeah. I like I think it was before like kind of the end of elementary school, beginning of middle school. I was kind of existing in this like depression baseline where I wasn't like actively in crisis or actively suicidal, but I just never like even when I felt joy, it was kind of muted. But it was really like around like sixth, seventh, eighth grade that I started to experience like the kind of the symptoms that make up my diagnoses now. Um, a lot of like the suicidal ideation, just feeling worthless, panic attacks. Um, I I also um, struggled a little bit with auditory hallucinations, and I don't have like a psychosis diagnosis, but with my psychiatrist, I've kind of figured out that like being in that like low of a mental state for like literally years, like kind of has kind of almost like altered something in my brain or something. But that's a thing that I struggle with and I kind of know that that's a sign. Okay, my depression is getting really bad, and this is like uh, when I need to really reach out for help.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know you kind of mentioned that you found a like community of people that could surround you and support you. So what was that experience like, and how would you suggest other people go about doing the same thing?
I mean, so I've I um had found a list of like resources for LGBTQ plus youth in the Bay Area, and literally I just picked the first one I clicked on was the one at the top of the list, and I went there, and that worked out so well that I haven't really bothered to check out a lot of the
Yeah,
other places. um
that's good though.
yeah, but like and I think the most difficult thing was going into the physical space because I had so many feelings of like, oh my god, like what if they don't like me? And because one of the diagnoses I have is social anxiety disorder, and that's gotten better, a lot better recently. But back then, it was just like terrifying this prospect of going in to this space with strangers.
Hmm.
Um, but just from the beginning, I there was just this sense of love, like like these people didn't really know who I was or anything about me, but they were willing to like to take the time to listen to me and to like to validate me, and that was I it to any like young person who's going through who's struggling with their mental health, also to folks in the LGBTQ plus community that even if they aren't struggling with their mental health, I if I could just tell you one thing to do that to help you, like one piece of advice that I have is to find a space, a community like that, because like especially battling depression is not really something you can do alone. Like as much as sometimes my brain wants to isolate, like it's these people, the people that I love and the people that love me and care about me, that's where I draw my strength.
Mhm.
And so I'm forever grateful to those people that have done that for me, and to people, to young people that are in a similar situation that I was. Just know that those people are out there, and we are like, we might not always, or actually probably we will probably never have a magic instantaneous solution to all your problems, but sometimes it's enough just to have somebody who knows what it feels like to just sit with you.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that's really awesome that you found that community. And for those in Santa Clara County who are interested in using that resource, would you mind sharing which one was helpful for you?
Yeah, so it's the LGBTQ youth space. Their website is literally youthspace.org, so very easy to remember.
Did you happen to seek professional assistance? I know you mentioned that you had your community of people, but what was it like? Did you seek professional assistance for your mental health during that time as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was like almost like I couldn't really not, because um it was like in middle school, it was literally so bad that I like couldn't get out of bed.
Mm.
So like, obviously my parents were like, okay, something's up, so let's set you up with a therapist. um I've had a lot of different therapists, some awesome, some not so awesome. um I I think also, like, a piece of advice is that, like, if you don't click with your therapist, or if your therapist does something that like makes you uncomfortable, you don't have to just like sit there and take it and just ignore your own feelings. It's okay to tell them like, this, what you said like made me uncomfortable, and it's okay to like try to seek out another person if it just isn't clicking for you.
Mhm.
um I think I've become a very discerning consumer of therapy from all my years. Um, I've and I've been on medication for a while, so obviously, that's been through the professional mental health help that I've
Mhm.
gotten.
Yeah, I think that's important. I think, yeah, especially with social anxiety, I assume like saying something about how you're uncomfortable may be hard to do, but I think that's important for you to, stand up for yourself and say something in times of need. And it's really important to find the help that's right for you, that fits for you. So, yeah, I completely agree with that advice. Was there something in particular that helped you heal or aided in your recovery during this time?
I have a lot of different things. Like, obviously, I had that community of people to rely on and to connect with. I really started to. I think I've always kind of been a creative person, whatever that means. Like, um, I I like to draw. I like to write. I play the drums and a little bit of some other instruments. Um, and like, it's fun in a sense of like it's a hobby, and so it takes, if I'm anxious about something or ruminating, doing those kinds of creative activities helps me get my mind off of it. But in another sense, it's especially my poetry that I write is almost like purging. Like, it's cathartic in this way of like, I I take this, like, the feelings that I struggle with and the like thoughts that I have and all this stuff, and I almost like barf it out onto the paper, and then it's there, and it's not like within me anymore.
Yeah, that's awesome you have that outlet. And speaking of spoken poetry, I was hoping you could perform one of your pieces right now.
Yeah. So I kind of my two flavors of poetry that I write are um, about my personal like struggles with my mental health, and also about kind of the structural oppressions that I struggle with and that I see people struggle with. So I am going to read this poem that I wrote called Trans Joy, and I think I need to give a little trigger warning, or just general trigger warning. I have written too many poems about death, dedicated too many of my words to those who would throw them away like they were never there. I have painted too many morbid portraits, and how typical of someone like me. But I don't know any other way. How familiar I am with sculpting my pain into something acceptable for you, into something that does not stir up controversy. How familiar I am with the hand around my throat, the boot on my face, that the absence of pain feels like the absence of hope. Is this what we were meant for? For spoken word obituaries, for dead friends, for subjugation, for war, for television cameos, a collage of our realities. For police policies that cost us our lives, they prey on the weakest among us, then tell us it cannot be slaughter when it happens so slow. It's not a coup when it's sponsored on your TV. And then I remember that pride started with a brick, that Seattle was a riot, that any revolution must first blossom from injustice, from the rage of the oppressed. I remember the girl I saw with her fist in the air, fingers furled tightly, clutching at that hope for posterity. I have written too many poems about death, and never again will I let her cold hands take away my fight that the world has tried to beat out of me, my fire that you can't extinguish, my joy that I seek.
Wow. I think I'm speechless. That was amazing.
Thank you.
How long does it usually take you to write a piece of poetry like that?
I don't edit them because then I get too critical. So I kind of maybe like around 10 minutes to 30 minutes, and it's just stream of consciousness.
Yeah.
And I kind of...
I can tell it's very raw and real. So it's amazing. So I'll ask you again at the end, but is there some place that you share your poetry on a regular basis, or like a social media account that people can follow for more?
I've been meaning to kind of start a consolidated place for my poetry, but I have not yet done so. I think the closest place would probably be maybe, or my handle on most social media is at Queer American Nightmare, which I started for my drag that I do. Right now I'm kind of taking a break from most social media, but if folks are really interested, they can also email me, and I can share some of my poems with them as well.
That'd be awesome. Thank you. The To Be Honest campaign was created by Momentum for Health and is sponsored by District 4 Inventory Funds, thanks to Supervisor Susan Ellenberg and Republic Urban Properties. This episode was hosted and edited by me, Avery Cruz, as well as edited by Peyton Delahaye. Music for the episode was made by Julia Steele. Thank you so much for tuning in as we continue to share stories of youth and young adults throughout the Bay Area who have personal experience with behavioral health issues. If you have a personal story or experience you'd like to share on the podcast, please email us at tbh.today@gmail.com. To learn more about the To Be Honest campaign and the podcast, we encourage you to visit our website, www.tobehonest.today, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at tobehonest.today. All this information is also in the show notes, so we look forward to hearing from you soon. Bye. Bye. Bye.